So, the next step in preparing our minds for learning and accepting change is listening to opposing views. Listening to opposing views does not mean that we're wrong about what we believe in, but it helps us understand the complexity of people, the world, and how reality is perceived by different people who, like you, have the same brains and thus the ability to think. So, the ability to listen to opposing views is always a winning strategy because if your view is false, then you have improved intellectually by changing and adopting a better view, or at least had the opportunity to do so. But if your view is true, then you have learned about the other views around an issue, giving you a better understanding of it, and you end up wiser because of that. So you can never lose when listening to people you disagree with. I want to throw a term here, which I call the selfish listener. If you Google this term, you'll see it interpreted differently by different people. But the way I define it is to care more about learning than teaching whenever I'm in a discussion or a debate. It is to be more concerned with improving your intellectual power than to be concerned with improving the other person. So whenever I enter a discussion, my primary objective is to emerge a wiser person. And whether the opposite side learns something or not, it's up to them. This approach will tackle two big learning barriers our brains set up when we debate people with opposing views. The first barrier is becoming emotionally triggered when hearing opposing views. We often get frustrated by people who oppose us. We cannot understand why they see the world so wrong, and sometimes we even think they want to offend us by the things they say. The second barrier to listening is the common practice of preparing your response while the opposite person is laying their argument, usually based on the very first phrase they speak. The problem with this is because your mind is preparing a response, it is not listening and it's not learning. And that's how we often end up in shouting matches or talking over each other. So, how being a selfish listener removes these barriers? First, we tell our brains that every information it absorbs is an opportunity to learn. We are not concerned with why the opposing person's view is so warped or whether they're trying to offend us. Our only concern as selfish listeners is to absorb as much information from that person that we can later process and think about. With the second barrier, it is more obvious. Because my interest is selfish, my concern is not to prepare replies to educate the opposing side, but to only absorb information. So when the opposite side is speaking and laying down arguments, it is in my interest to carefully listen to what they say. It is to try to fully understand their view, and to do that, my brain must not be engaged in anything but receiving information. Once they finish and I carefully examine their argument, I will take my time, remain silent as I prepare my reply. They might think that their response baffled me because I paused before replying, that they got me. And that's fine. I'll give them the win. Because my sole interest is to learn, not to educate and not to win argument. This approach does not apply to formal debates or competitions, of course, where you have to win arguments and win the audience. But in private discussions, I do use this approach to the point that I turn debates into interviews, where my replies don't necessarily always challenge my opposition, but try to further explore their mind and see how they view a certain issue in a deeper sense. But of course, this must not always be your approach. In some cases, we do need to educate others. We need the best ideas to win and spread in society. But this is definitely an approach you want to have in your arsenal to enable your brain to learn and gain more wisdom. One of the benefits you develop using this approach is that you become a more curious person who breaks out of echo chambers. You become more interested in people different from you than people similar to you. Whenever I listen to people with opposing views, I want to learn more about how and why they develop these views. What life experiences did they live through? What kind of society they grew up in? Do other people with similar experiences think like them or differently, and why? Opening these doors has offered me many opportunities to learn about people, the world, and its complexities. It definitely beats labeling them as ignorant or deluded and simply moving on because there must be nothing worth learning from them.